This is the interior of the Colosseum as painted by American artist Thomas Cole while he was traveling in Europe in 1832. Around the arena, you can see the extensive overgrowth of vegetation and the badly damaged ruins of the stadium. Cole traveled to Europe for 3 years, and instead of all the remnants he saw of the classical civilizations, this one affected him the most. Little did he even know that 40 feet below the main area of his painting was the Colosseum's basement, an underworld that had been buried for 1,300 years, known as the Hypogeum. Today, the Hypogeum has long since been excavated, and it now makes the Colosseum look like this mess of weaving stone walls and tunnels protruding from the ground. But in ancient Rome, this area was covered by a main stage where an elaborate show was being delivered to a crowd that had no idea of the incredible choreography taking place below. In stifling heat, up to 1,000 workers, many of these slaves, gladiators, and exotic animals were all working together to deliver a performance of animal hunts, stage combats, and gladiatorial fights. The Hypogeum was actually finished 10 years after the Colosseum, which was then known as the Flavian Amphitheater, was opened. The project delivered and finished under the Emperor Domitian. The entire base of the Colosseum measures 6 acres, so the Hypogeum is large and intricate. Historians to this day are trying to piece together exactly how it would have all worked together. It was a 2-level subterranean elaborate network of tunnels, cages, storage rooms, narrow passageways, and animal pens housing a variety of species. Imagine moving a hippo or an elephant through these corridors. The Hypogeum allowed organizers of the games to create surprises and build suspense. That famous scene from Gladiator where the tiger emerges from seemingly out of nowhere, well, the Hypogeum was the area these animals would have been stored and lifted up ancient elevators like this one to the floor. These vertical shafts contained lifts operated by ropes and pulleys which led directly to the arena. Spectators at the time described these animals appearing on the stage as if by magic. Recently, they created one of these famous lifts and trapdoors and released an animal. This is a wolf emerging from the lift, the first time in 1,500 years a wild animal had been lifted onto the floor of the Colosseum. Evidence suggests that upwards of 28 lifts specifically designed to transport up to 600 pounds each existed in this underground, and that at one animal hunt during the games, 50 lions appeared all at once. In the tunnels of the Hypogeum would have strode the gladiators and the bestiari, who would have heard the screams and shouts of the crowd, the noise rattling the earth, all while waiting to be hoisted into the arena. This is a central corridor where gladiators once walked. These tunnels actually run far outside the stadium, leading to many areas, including to one of Rome's most famous gladiator schools, the Ludus Magnus, which lay just east of the stadium. Endless training and drilling was required to make sure that the show ran smoothly. This was demanded by the emperor, the host of the games, who, if perturbed, may just make an unlucky worker fight in the arena over a botched assignment. There's also evidence for existence of massive hydraulic mechanisms and an ancient drain that would have made it possible to flood the arena and recreate those famous naval battles in 3 to 5 foot high water. These fake sea battles, or as they were called, Naumachia, became virtually impossible to hold once the Hypogeum was built. These drains also would have fed waste, blood, and garbage right into the Tiber. With the end of the gladiator games and the fall of the empire, the Hypogeum lay buried and forgotten beneath 40 feet of earth for over 1,500 years. After the last games were held in the 6th century, the Romans quarried stones from the Colosseum, and down through the centuries, the stadium was used for a shocking number of things. For example, in the Middle Ages, with the Hypogeum covered, in the amphitheater above, the vaulted passages sheltered cobblers, blacksmiths, priests. A Roman patrician family in the 12th century even took over the stadium and fortified it, apparently using it as a castle. In the late 16th century, a pope even tried to transform the Colosseum into a wool factory to provide employment for Rome's prostitutes. The plan was to have workshops on the arena floor and living quarters in the upper stories, but this proposal fell through. In the subsequent years, botanists used the arena for their creative outlets, and by the 1900s, all memories of the ancient use of the Colosseum was gone. Of all people, Benito Mussolini, who was obsessed with the glorification of classical Rome, excavated and cleared the Hypogeum for good in the 1930s. These days, the Colosseum is one of the most visited places in the world, and Hollywood has certainly added to its lore, but even looking at the stadium that's a shell of what was once the grandest venue on Earth, it's not hard to wonder what it was like in its heyday. It's easy to romanticize what the games would have been like at the arena, but the reality of the experience would have been very different from a high-ranking official to a slave working in the Hypogeum. I'll finish with this description of what the experience would have been like in this ancient underworld during the games. It was hot as a boiler room in the summer, humid and cold in the winter, and filled all year round with strong smells from the smoke, the sweating workmen packed in the narrow corridors, and the reek of the wild animals. The noise was overwhelming. Creaking machinery, people shouting, and animals growling. The signals made by organs, horns, or drums to coordinate the complex series of tasks people had to carry out. And then, of course, the din of the fighting going on just overhead, with the crowd roaring.